I don't want to talk about that today. I want to talk about space. And I want to share with you some of the experience that we have flying in space. None of these pictures are taken from Google Earth. Right? They are really taken by real people, me, many of my friends, and they are designed to give you the feeling of what it's like to fly around this beautiful planet from space. So if we could have the lights down a little bit. Sorry to the photographer, you're going to lose some of your photons. Too bad. So when I was a kid, the dreams of people going into space were captured by artists like Chesley Bonestell here, and he thought we might have winged flying spaceships, giant space telescopes, and space stations. We have all three of those. And I've been lucky to participate in flying a winged spaceship 4 times, twice on Atlantis, twice on Endeavour, working with space telescopes of various types, and flying up to the Russian Mir space station. My time in space ended before we started constructing the International Space Station, but I'll show you some pictures from that as well. And here are some of those things that we have. This is the winged spaceship, the nose of it in the front, and part of the space station in the background there. And here are people building that space station above the planet, several hundred miles up there. This is our winged spaceship. This is on my second mission. My helmet is just barely visible right there, going up about 7 seconds after launch in this case. It's just a fabulous feeling to launch into space. I would do that any day of the week, especially when the alternative is sitting in faculty meetings. So when you get to space, you open these fabulous payload bay doors of the shuttle, and you have an incredible view of the Earth. It is just marvelous. I mean, floating around there is fun. It's like all the dreams you had when you were 9 years old. But looking at the Earth is endlessly fascinating. It's just marvelous. It would absorb your attention full time if they didn't tell you had to go to sleep. And you look down and you see these marvelous storms. This is a typhoon. People have been carrying cameras into space ever since John Glenn's first flight about 50 years ago. And here is Colonel John Glenn with a camera. NASA was too cheap to buy a camera, so he bought one, and his friend Wally Schirra bought one with his money. Not nearly as good as the one that he's using right there. This was an Ansco Autoset used film. He shot 2 rolls of film up there. Actually, in those bulky gloves, managed to change film while he was up there. And this is the very first picture of space taken by a human being. And he took it about 8-9 minutes after launch, reaching the coast of Africa. These are the Anti-Atlas Mountains here, looking back. You can see the care that NASA took of the original negatives of these films, right? We found when we were doing some research, this in a dusty drawer someplace in the archives at Kennedy Space Center. The shuttle, on the other hand, was a marvelous flying machine. It had huge windows. These are 4 of the 11 windows on the shuttle. They're each about ½ a meter on a side, and just an amazing view of the planet. We took a bunch of cameras into space. These, by this time, NASA had bought them. They were no longer quite so cheap. But I have to say, many of these were left over from 30 years before from the Apollo and Gemini programs. We refurbished them. Nikon cameras, like folks use here. And then a big camera, which was my favorite, that took 4-inch by 5-inch negatives. And so it's these cameras aimed by real human beings that I'm going to show you these photographs of. And here is a real human being who needs a shave, taking some pictures out on my 3rd mission here. So I'm going to start our tour the same way we fly around the planet. We go from Florida east, and here we are approaching the coast of Africa, and beautiful volcanic islands here. Again, these same Anti-Atlas Mountains, and a bit of dust in a storm here in Africa. We get to the Sahara and these gorgeous colors. This is at sunrise or sunset. It brings out the volcanic glass, has this gorgeous set of colors, and you'll see many of these. The desert is unbelievably varied, as some of you know who have traveled around Africa and the Middle East. This is the Tiffany Dunes and a big sand sea in soft volcanic rock that has been eroded, some of it sedimentary rock that's been eroded over the years. And this is a big amphitheater carved out by the winds in Mauritania called the Richat structure. It's not an impact crater. It's just carved in the soft rock by the unrelenting winds there. These are beautiful sand dunes. And it rains occasionally, even in North Africa. And you can see the rivers that are carved out every 20 or 30 years when it does rain, bringing this gorgeous sand down into the lowlands. Flying further, we occasionally encounter these dust storms, which you have here. But this is a massive one that holds together for hundreds of miles. And some of these sweep all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. And about 5% of the nutrients in the rainforest in South America are supplied by dust from these dust storms that cross the Atlantic, as it turns out. Now, here's a picture taken by the Apollo astronauts on their way to the moon. And it shows the green line here, shows dark here, where the boundary between no rainfall up here in the desert and the lush, rainy area of Africa is. Here is the Kalahari Desert down in the south, and about 20 degrees south latitude and 20 degrees north latitude, all around the planet, you find deserts. And that's because we find that there is a circulation of the atmosphere, which is one of the things that they should tell you in high school, but rarely do. The sun's beating down at the equator, right? And it heats the air. The air rises, hot air rises, and it falls. But it can't fall right back down. So just like a fountain, it falls down north and south of the areas where it rises. Well, it's gone up through the very cold stratosphere, and all of the moisture has been frozen out of it. So when it whooshes down to the surface, it's quite dry, and it suppresses rainfall. So all around the planet, when you look at about 20 north and 20 south, you'll see deserts. And so that's what we see. And this is an indication that that green line I showed you on this one moves back and forth. Here's a lake called Lake Chad. And here it is taken in about 1965, and it's pretty full. And here it is taken a bit later, and you can see that it's fairly full. Right? Another picture. But here, the only water, and this was a picture taken about 1985, 20 years after that first one, all the water is here. That green line has just moved a little bit south. And that fluctuation in this fountain of air causes these gigantic droughts. And this is in the Sahel region of Africa, where there's tens of millions of people whose livelihood is affected by this little change in the Earth's fountain that has these profound impacts. Well, here moving into the area where Egypt and Sudan and Libya go together, we see the plugs left from ancient volcanoes. And you can imagine the fierce winds that just blow along here, moving these gorgeous sand dunes. This is a picture I took on my second flight. And we move into Egypt. You get the Nile. And, of course, the Nile gives life to the desert lands there. There's a saying that Egypt is the Nile and the Nile is Egypt. Here you can see the two branches of the Nile here. And the fertile land just irrigated by the water. Here's the Fayum Depression, the Suez Canal down through there. Here's Alexandria, and the city is right here. You can see some center pivot irrigation where they have drilled down. There's a well in the center of each of these, and they have tapped the lens of fresh water that is under the surface that flows also along with the Nile. Because Egypt's population is increasing very fast. The doubling time is about 12 years, maybe 15 years now. And so in order to feed the people, they're moving out into the desert. This is the area at the throat of the Nile here, in Cairo is right there. The pyramids are here, and here's a picture of the pyramids taken with a long telephoto lens. There's the pyramids here and here that you can see, all along in there. You can see some fabulous things from up there. Again, these are all things you can see with your eye. visible light photographs taken with cameras just like the ones that are used there. Hold up your camera, please. Just like that, except that's a Canon and we use Nikons, right? Thank you. And it's just marvelous what you can see. You can see the same detail that you can from an airliner, but you can see hundreds of miles in every direction. So here's a nighttime picture. We can take pictures with high-speed film at night. This is the lights along the Nile and Cairo here, and all along the coast, and across to the other side of the Mediterranean, Greece, and Italy up there. And you can see the curvature of the planet. This glowing layer here is sulfur, nitrogen, and sodium that is lit up about 60 miles above the atmosphere. And these are atoms and some ions up there. Well, let's move down further into South Africa. This is the Namib Desert. And this is an area where a huge fraction of the planet's diamonds are found in the Namib Desert. This area is patrolled by teenagers with automatic weapons, right, in jeeps, so you don't go walking around there, because there are diamonds, not just in the mines, but there are even some on the surface. And moving further east, this is the island of Madagascar. Now I want to show you the first of what I'll talk about is human-caused change on the planet. I'll show you some natural change as well. In Madagascar, this little green strip is all that is left of the forest that once covered the entire island of Madagascar. But there's only one fertilizer plant on the island, and so people have done slash and burn agriculture, clearing the land of the trees, burning them for their farms. And that has left the land vulnerable to the great monsoon storms that sweep across the Indian Ocean and erode the land that used to be protected by the trees. And this bright red river is the Betsy Boca River. And all of this silt has fallen into the river since the trees have been cleared. And the monsoon rains have washed much of the topsoil into the river. The erosion rates there approach 10 centimeters a year, right? It's just a huge amount of erosion per year. And again, natural change, no. Human-caused change because of removing the trees. So now let's move further north. This is the Straits of Gibraltar. Here is the Rock of Gibraltar right here. And distance between Spain and North Africa, not much, looks about the same. These circles are caused by the tides every 6 hours sweeping in and out of the Straits of Gibraltar. And any of you take physics as undergraduates? Right. Okay, you remember the diffraction grating? This is just diffraction, right? It's just a slit, and instead of light moving through it, it's waves, and you get these same kind of things. Okay. These are the Atlas Mountains. I'm sorry, these are the Alps Mountains in Switzerland here, the Eiger and the Matterhorn and so forth, and Lake Basel, just beautiful. And these are glaciers moving out, now shrinking, of course, but moving out this way and taking with them some of the mountains. Sicily and the boot of Italy, the Straits of Messina right there. And what's this? These are two plumes. This one is natural from Mount Etna, but this one is a plume of sewage. And it turned out, you know, you hear that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Pictures are really a way to connect emotionally with people. When the Italians saw this photograph taken from the U.S. space shuttle, they were so embarrassed that they not only cleaned up their own sewage problem, but they led a coalition to clean up raw sewage dumped into the Mediterranean from all the countries around the Med. Very powerful thing that images can be. Now, I mentioned Mount Etna. Here is a close-up picture of Mount Etna during one of its eruptions. It puts out marvelous fertilizer for you if you happen to be living there, right? But you don't want to be there when the thing goes off. So people kind of make a bet, right? They farm in this very rich farmland, but every few generations something like this happens, and the generation that happened to be living there at the time doesn't like it so very well. So now moving into Greece, and the Peloponnesus here, Athens over here, The mountains up here, Delphi, the Oracle, about there. And Crete, this is a satellite that we had released from the space shuttle. And yes, these are snow-capped peaks there on Crete. And Cyprus, off the bottom of Turkey. Just beautiful with our wide-angle camera from up there. All right, so now we'll move over closer to home. This is in the eastern part of Turkey, a volcanic crater there in the winter. It's just gorgeous to fly over the Middle East from up in space. So now, I'll show you the first picture of where we are. Got it right there. The Arabian Peninsula, this beautiful sand sea through here, the Red Sea and the Gulf here, and the Nile that we just looked at over there. So now looked at from the south, the Straits of Hormuz, and right there is where we are, right about there. And here, again, these are real pictures taken by real people, right? Here is the wing of the solar array on the space shuttle, and we're right here. Okay? And all along there. And a closer view, and we are right there. You can actually make, and that's just taken with an ordinary lens on our camera from the space station. Here is the airport, and as I say, you can see the same kind of things that you can see from an airliner. How many of you like to look out the window of an airliner when you're flying? Right. Okay. You can see, this is endlessly fascinating flying in space. Right. And here's Palm. Okay, over there. Right. Sorry. Pearl. I'm sorry. Pearl. Right. Palm's another place. And here it is at night. So you can see very beautiful. So lovely. All right, so now I mentioned the center pivot irrigation before when talking about Egypt. And this is in Saudi, and just a huge number of center pivot. There is fossil water. We don't know for how long. It might be 50 years. It might be 100 years, but it's finite, under the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. And, of course, Saudi Arabia is a food exporter, the only large one in the Middle East. Here's other ones. Now, here you can see that there's some where they're not growing crops. And what's happened is that we've seen, since people started growing crops here, the first invasions of locusts since biblical times. And it's because in biblical times we were at the end of the last ice age. This was a very wet area. The whole of what was called the Fertile Crescent, all through the eastern end of the Mediterranean, all through to northern Africa, was quite wet in this wet period about 5,000 years ago to 3,000 years ago, more or less. The climate dried out and changed between 2,500 years ago and 2,000 years ago to what we're seeing now. So now to the beauty of the desert. I don't need to tell many of you, it's just gorgeous. This is at sunset. And here at dawn, different parts. This happens to be in Algeria, actually. And these beautiful Barkans in the, just absolutely gorgeous. I'm fascinated by looking out of the window of the shuttle flying over. It's one of the most beautiful areas of the whole planet. All right, so let's move farther up north. This is Russia, former Soviet Union. And this line here is the largest engineering project, the biggest civil engineering project of the 1800s. It's the Trans-Siberian Railway, about 5,000 miles through pretty awful landscape that gets quite swampy. And the towns are spaced at just about the distance that a coal-fired train could go without refueling and getting more water. The big one is the town of Omsk here, and you can see it dark in a picture that we took in April of 1994. And here's a closer-up view. And here it's quite interesting. What they've done, these are rows of trees and farmers' fields in between. And because this is in Kazakhstan, the fierce winds would take the topsoil and blow it away in great dust storms, as happened in the United States in the 1930s. They have learned from that and planted tree rows to interrupt the dust so we don't have that much of a problem. Now I'll show you a thing that they didn't do right. This is another man-made change. This is what, when I was in school, was the fourth largest body of fresh water on the planet, called the Aral Sea. And I'm going to show you a sequence of photographs. This one was taken in 1984. And look at the size of this island and this channel here. Just keep that in your mind. Picture taken that I took on my second flight in 1992. And see, the island's gotten bigger. Let me go back. See that same island up here? Gotten bigger, right? And that's because the sea has shrunk. And this channel has closed off. Here's another picture taken in 1997. And the island has now cut the sea off. This is completely closed off. And the reason for that is that Premier Khrushchev decided that Russia ought to be, Soviet Union in those days, ought to be self-sufficient in cotton. That sea, the Aral Sea, is irrigated by only two streams that go into it, the Amudarya and the Syr-Darya River, and they supply all of the water for that. Cotton is a very thirsty crop, and to irrigate the cotton fields, and you can see this dense network of irrigation channels here in the glint of the sun photo I took in 92, that they are sucking all of the water out of those two streams going in there, and that's what's caused the lake level to drop. From a monetary standpoint, the value of the fishing industry that was destroyed exceeds the cotton value by about a factor of 10. Very bad decision, as it turns out. All right, now so I'll show you some natural change. This is India, right? Sri Lanka over here. And India has been shoving north into Asia at the rate of 5 or 10 centimeters a year, roughly. And the result of that, you can just see on the horizon there, the Himalayas. Here is, any of you ever see a car accident? I'm sure that doesn't happen here in Doha. Right. Okay. So this is a big fender bender. And this fender bender is because of India pushing north into Africa. This is the Makran Range, and this big folding is all due to that collision happening. And here's another result of that collision. This is the high Himalayas, taken in an oblique view with a telephoto lens from the International Space Station. And you can see them thrown up into the sky there. And here is Mount Everest, just a beautiful view. People first hiked up there, going this way and up to the South Col, and here's the peak of Everest. And this is the great north face of Everest there. So moving further into Asia, this is in Bangladesh. The black area that you see there is a preserve. The Bangladesh government has decided, in one of the poorest nations in the world, that the natural environment is so important to them that they have set aside about a third of the land in Bangladesh for various natural reserves. This is one of them. And this beautiful area is the last reserve of the Asiatic tiger. And you can see the boundary of the national park there. This is the mouths of the Ganges over there. Moving up into the area between China and Mongolia and Russia, the gorgeous lake called Lake Isyat-Kul, depression between two mountain ranges there. And again, just a beautiful planet to fly around. Now, let's move into Japan. This is Tokyo Bay. And Tokyo here, the Imperial Palace grounds right about there, Yokohama down there. Fuji is just off the side of the picture. And here's a picture of Fuji we took in '94. And Japan is a lovely country to see from space. If you move into the Ring of Fire going around the Pacific Ocean, you see active volcanoes. Now I'm going to show you a few of them. This is on the peninsula, Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, former Soviet Union. And this is Kluchevskaya volcano that was going off just as we flew over it. This is a volcano in Rabaul in the Philippines. A crew took that in October of 1994. And you see a low cloud of ash and a high cloud of steam out of this. And then I'm going to show you just a remarkable picture here taken of a volcano that had a very stunning explosion just as, again, the shuttle was going over it. Again, on the Russian side, this is up at the Kamchatka Peninsula of Russia. Just amazing volcano. We took this picture in 1992 in sunset, looking across the Pacific. You can see these high thunderstorms over there, clouds of dust and gas that had been put there by the explosion of a volcano called Mount Pinatubo that happened in July of 1991, that stayed in the atmosphere for about 5 years. Gave us lovely sunsets. It also made the planet muddy. A telephoto picture of a huge cloud coming off a thunderstorm and beautiful blue sky above. And then one of the things that you won't see here in Doha, I think, but we saw last night on the airliner up around Greenland was the aurora. Just absolutely fabulous, dancing through the sky. One of the most beautiful things that I think I've seen from the shuttle is these displays of the aurora. I was lucky enough to be on 3 of my 4 flights flying very far north, so we saw this quite often. And just constantly changing, looks like the flames of the burners on gas stoves. And it's just marvelous that we could build a ship that could fly right through that. And here we are. This is the firing of one of the thrusters on the space shuttle here. And a picture of Orion, the constellation here, but setting on his head, which you don't usually see in the northern hemisphere. I took this picture in the southern hemisphere there. And it looks like the stars are actually closer to you than the planet. This is the Airglow layer here again. But in fact, this layer at about 60 miles in the atmosphere is so thin that you can see the stars right through it. So let's fly now across the Pacific Ocean. And you see these marvelous coral atolls, usually because the sea level has risen above a volcano. And another coral atoll there. And you see these marvelous storms. This is looking down the throat of a typhoon or a hurricane, as we'd call them in the Atlantic. And you can actually see the seafloor there through the eye of the hurricane. Very powerful thunderstorms and tornadoes even right around the eye can be seen there. This is a much more gentle storm. In fact, it might not even be labeled a storm at all. It's just an open, low-pressure area. The way that the atmosphere works is that air flows from high pressure to low pressure. And since the Earth is rotating more quickly at the equator than at the poles, if you get a distance, and here's about 25 miles from one side of the picture to the next, the air at the top of the picture, north, is moving less fast than the air at the bottom. And so you get this counterclockwise circulation as it tries to go into the low pressure area. Flying across again the Pacific, the Galapagos Islands, these volcanoes that have merged with one another. Of course, this is famous from Darwin's work on the finches and other things that led him to evolution, and his work later, almost 50 years later, published. Beautiful vortices shed in the fog. What's happening here is there's an island right there, and the wind is blowing from the bottom of the picture up to the top, and it's shed these vortexes just behind the island in the turbulent flow that you can see if you ever watch a cigarette curling up. And just gorgeous what you can see from up there. Now, so let's move into South America. This is the spine of the Andes looking south as they meet the Pacific Ocean. And you can see these gorgeous glaciers there melting. As you can see, I've actually stood at the foot of that glacier. And here's another picture at a different year of the Peto Merino Glacier. And I've actually been right there on the ground. Now, into the Amazon. This is what the whole rainforest there looked like when I was the age of most of you students. Right? It was all unbroken tree land. This happens to be a fairly swampy area, so they can't use it for development. This is what the rest of the Amazon looks like during burning season. This is looking across the high Andes, and the entire Amazon basin is filled with smoke from farmers clearing the land of the Amazon rainforest. And again, closer up pictures of None of these are natural fires. These are all set by farmers clearing their land. And this is the result in the dry season. You can see that what they've done is they've logged in here. This is a road, and the farms have been logged at right angles to the road, and there's just this little strip of forest left in between them. So they cut down, plant crops, burn the trees. Right? This is what it looks like in a different area. This is in Bolivia, not in Brazil. They have a slightly different pattern of development, but you can see they'll do a road here, crossing road, and then from the center of town, people do these gore-shaped farms. And this is what the original rainforest looked like. Okay? So this is the mouth of the Amazon River, 100 miles, 120 miles wide, and has this huge pulse of sediment going out into the Atlantic Ocean. The Amazon is bigger than the next 4 rivers, the 4 largest rivers on the planet combined. It's just amazing to fly over it and see that. This is the isthmus, the narrowest part of Central America, where the Panama Canal is. And here's a picture of the canal. You can actually see the boats in there. And again, you can see that with your naked eye from the shuttle. It's fascinating to keep looking out the window and flying up there. Moving up into Mexico, these are the high mountains near where Mexico City is. And now moving up into the United States, this is Canada, British Columbia up here. This is Vancouver and Seattle down here. Any of you who have trouble with Microsoft products, that's where the problem was, right there, Redmond. Okay. This is Mount St. Helens. The explosion of that about almost 30 years ago tore out the whole side of the mountain here and put tens of millions of pounds of debris down here into Toutle Lake and Spirit Lake and the Toutle River along here. And now moving into San Francisco, the San Francisco Golden Gate is covered with fog. This is the San Andreas Fault, and here's the Hayward Fault right there, where the most recent San Francisco earthquake was. But the big 1906 earthquake was right along this fault right there. This is Los Angeles, a picture taken at night. That was the fault, cracking, right? Okay. And a picture of LA taken at night there, and you can see all the streets clogged with cars during the day. This is the desert in the U.S. near Yuma, the Colorado River, the Salton Sea, created by diverting the waters of the Colorado River. And beautiful, again, fertile land. There's no difference between the land here and the land here, except this one is irrigated, has water, the so-called Imperial Valley. And this is the top of the Gulf of California. I'm going to show you a picture here of what's left of the Colorado River as it goes into the Gulf of California. Every drop of the Colorado River is used, and all that's left down at the bottom is very salty and silty stuff that gets into the top of the Gulf of California there. Moving across, this is the Grand Canyon of the Colorado River. Here, you can hike down through these cracks right there very easily into the beautiful Grand Canyon. Gorgeous place. Moving across into Arizona, highlighted by the snow is a high ridge here called Black Mesa, black because of coal. And gorgeous colors. Again, desert colors are the most beautiful anywhere. And in the U.S., you have these mines. This is an open pit mine you can see from space. Happens to be a copper mine, but we have coal mines that you can also see from space. The city of Denver, shown as a smudge here in a photograph from the mid-1970s. Denver is now much bigger. The low and the high Rockies, this is all clouds, but the rest of it is all snow. The Rocky Mountains up there. And the Great Lakes, these were left by glaciers moving down here, Lake Superior, the one up at the top there. And here is a wide-angle picture taken from the space station. This is Lake Michigan here, and Huron, Lake Superior up here. And this is Michigan right there, Detroit around there. This is natural change again. That is Lake Manicouagan in Canada, caused by the impact of an asteroid hitting the Earth, right? This, you might say, is a very rare occurrence. Well, if you look at the moon, you can see that the moon is scarred with these craters. We don't see very many of them on the Earth, because unlike the moon, the surface of this planet changes a lot. But I will show you just about 300 miles from where we took this picture, there are not one, but two other craters. An asteroid and its moon hit the Earth at the same time simultaneously. And this doesn't happen very often. But when it does, it can ruin your whole day. Right? So this is off the coast of Newfoundland. Icebergs, and again, low light gives you these beautiful colors. And again, the effect of the glaciers. These are a couple of the Great Lakes north of where Pittsburgh is, and these, called the Finger Lakes, were caused by the glaciers just scraping south, just as if you took your fingernails in sand and went like that. Closer up picture of these. Nice farmland around there, too. Glaciers are very good for farmland. They pushed all of Canada's land down into the U.S., so we got this beautiful gift of farmland from the Canadians. Picture I took at night of New York City. This is Manhattan Island there, Central Park. They keep it dark so that the thieves can have something to do, I guess, right? Long Island over here, and the Connecticut coast up here, not quite to New Haven where Yale is. This is Cape Cod, another gift from the glaciers as they pushed south. There's Boston over here, Cape Cod Canal, and Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket. The glaciers surged south, left those, retreated, surged south again, but not quite as far, and left Cape Cod. So natural change. This is Cape Hatteras off of North Carolina, and where the Wright brothers started aviation was right about here, Kill Devil Hills. This is not a good place to be in a hurricane. You can't get off that. This is where we started our journey, Cape Kennedy, and the two shuttle launch pads right there, and this is the runway where we landed the shuttle so very many times. And again, storms can affect it quite seriously. This is a hurricane that was sitting off Tampa Bay for about 5 days, pumping tremendous amount of moisture up into Florida. And another hurricane observed from the International Space Station. This is the Bahamas, where a lot of people from Pittsburgh like to go in the winter. We had a very serious one this year. But now they come to Doha instead. It's more beautiful. So this is Eleuthera Island, and what you see, all this white, is sand dunes, but they're below the surface of the ocean. Gorgeous area. And this is the International Space Station that was constructed up there at sunset. A beautiful place to view the Earth. This is a cupola that is not quite as nice architecture as we have here at the campus here, but it is a very nice place to look at the Earth from. This one happens to be very close to here, over there. And a picture taken by a friend of mine on a spacewalk of one of his crewmates inside the cupola looking out. This is the space station, taken from the shuttle, the moon in the background there, flying above the Earth. And a friend of mine who I just saw last week in Pittsburgh, Tracy Caldwell, looking out at the Earth from the cupola. That's just the most amazing thing, looking at the planet. You see marvelous things. This is a comet observed from the space station just before dawn, which is when you see comets, or just around sunset, close to the Earth. This, again, is this layer of sodium and sulfur and nitrogen about 60 miles above the solid surface of the planet, and the blue dawn just coming there, and the comet rising just before sunrise. And looking out here at the stars, the things that you can see are just limitless. Amazing place. We've just made the first baby steps into the universe. We go forward, we'll go back, but it's clear that people will continue to look and perhaps to go out there in the future. And I hope I've been able to share with you this afternoon some little bit of what it's been like for us to fly around the planet. And I hope that it's inspired you to look at the beauty around you, because you live here in a gorgeous place. There is fantastic area around here. And so thank you very much. And we have some time for questions. So thank you. Thank you for getting the lights on. Yeah, I think we have about 8 minutes or so for questions. So, first. Yes?
Did it ever break your heart whenever you were flying around and
well, the question was, does it break your heart to see some of these human-caused changes? One of the reasons why you take pictures and share them with people is so that you can learn from your mistakes, right? I mean, we make mistakes in business. We make mistakes in government. We make mistakes, you know, in cooking dinner, right? The trick is learning from it and not doing the same mistakes again. And so, yes, I think the answer is that when you're able to share photographs like these with people, it makes them less prone to make the same mistakes twice. Really? I think so, yeah. I mean, well, you see, the photograph that I told you about cleaning up the sewage going into the Mediterranean, that's nice. In Pittsburgh, when I was a boy, the air was so dirty that my father couldn't wear the same shirt to dinner that he had worn to work during the day. Right? That kind of pollution is evident to people, and we cleaned it up in the United States and later in most other areas. It hasn't made it to Beijing yet, but that's a different story. Right? And so people clean that stuff up that they can see the larger scale things that require people to look at from a different vantage point. It takes a while. But I'm completely convinced of the power of artistic images to help people connect emotionally with things. To make change, you need connection both at the pocketbook, at the head, and at the heart. Right? And so this is one of those three things. It's not sufficient by itself, but it helps. Some others. I'm told that this is not a shy group. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about where technology might take space travel in the future. Last week there was a theoretical physicist visiting us here, Dr. Michio Kaku. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he told us that the technology that backed the first mission into space was backed by 64K processors, and how now the equivalent of that power can be found in any everyday singing birthday card, which made me think about how technology affects our travel. And I just wonder if you could comment on the future.
Sure. I think he was wrong, actually. The first processors were 8K. So they were even smaller. Yeah, sure. I think I am convinced that none of the space agencies, Russia, US, Japan, have spent enough money recently on basic research. But I see some of that situation changing. And in the US, we have a technology that we're trying out on this space station in a year, I guess, to have a plasma engine. Instead of a chemical rocket, it accelerates things electronically. The nice thing about that is that instead of just having a pulse once, and then you have to coast to Mars or wherever you're going, and it takes you a year to get to Mars, you can have a much lower level of thrust, but continuously. And then you can get to Mars in 60 days, perhaps 30 days, depending on the size. Those kind of technologies certainly are going to take some time to develop. We need to be able to reuse our own water, right? You need to be able to have more autonomous operations of the crew than you have now, so you don't have this standing army in mission control. And you need to have a propulsion system that takes advantage of nuclear power. It's going to take us a couple of 100 years to be able to move at will throughout the inner solar system, but we are making some progress. Yes, there's one right here.
Yes, thank you for this presentation. What were you doing when you're not taking pictures?
Wow, what am I doing when I'm not taking pictures? Well, what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm taking pictures is sleeping. They don't actually make you time to take pictures on most flights. So on my first flight, our job was to take a 38,000-pound observatory called the Gamma Ray Observatory into space. My job on that flight was to monitor all the systems aboard that. And we had planned a spacewalk, the first in 5.5 years. There had been an accident that had intervened, to test some systems that are now being deployed on the International Space Station. That picture there is during the first spacewalk. As it turns out, the Gamma Ray Observatory had developed a problem, and my partner and I had to go out and fix it. That was an emergency, which we had not trained for. We trained for other ones on that spacecraft. But we went out and we were able to fix it. And we did some of the work we planned the next day anyway, and then we went out and did the first back-to-back spacewalks, actually the only ones in the shuttle program. On the second flight, we had a cooperative U.S.-Japanese space laboratory mission. It's a 24-hour-a-day operation. My job was to be the commander of the ship for 12 hours a day and run the ship. The third flight was going to image the planet in radar waves. The kind of things that you have in your cell phone now that tell you the elevation of things was all done from that flight and 2 others that followed it. And again, it was a 24-hour-a-day operation. It was my ship for 12 hours a day. We had to point the ship in various different directions to do the radar imaging. So we had more flying time on that flight, each shift, each of the 2 shifts, than the whole rest of the shuttle program up to that point combined. So we had a lot of fun on that flight. In the 4th flight, my job was to navigate us up to the Russian space station Mir and to do all the rocket engine firings to get us there to about 300 feet away from Mir, where my commander took over visually and flew us in from there. So, and then I had various other duties as assigned. I was generally the in-flight maintenance person that fixed things when they broke. When the IT systems didn't work, I was the help desk, stuff like that. So, we have time for 1 or 2 more. 1 more. Was there one back there? You know, if not, I'm a teacher. There's going to be a quiz. Yes, go ahead.
Hello. I just want to tell everybody that I just saved you from a quiz. And my question is, when you go to space and you see this, these massive structures and all these planets, and you see how, like, we're such a very small part of this universe, what ideas come to your mind?
Well, it's a good question. The first is, when you look at something like this, you know, you see all these structures, you have to say, I don't care how infrequent planets are, how infrequent planets like Earth are among those, how infrequent life is, there's got to be life out there. There's just so many stars, right? We're starting to learn about the number of planetary systems. There's a lot. Most stars have planets. We know nothing about how many of those are Earth-like. By the time you're my age, we will. But we still won't know anything about how many of those have life. And what are the chances that if you do have life, it's something better than the slime in your refrigerator, right? We won't know that for some time. But I think the chances on all these stars of there being life are pretty good. So that's, I think about things like that. So I think it's a wonderful universe, and it's going to be fabulous what people your age learn when you're my age. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.